Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The hotel lobby was buzzing with the usual afternoon traffic. Guests checked in, bellhops scurried about, and a couple of businessmen argued over an invoice. The air hummed with normalcy, the type of scene you'd expect to find in any upscale establishment. But then, she walked in. Lena adjusted the strap of her worn handbag as she stepped through the glass doors. Her heart pounded. She wasn't used to places like this, where the marble floors gleamed like polished stone and chandeliers hung overhead like sparkling jewels. The high-end fragrance that filled the air mixed with the faint sound of classical music playing in the background. Everything here screamed wealth, status, and power. But to her, it felt like an alien world. Her plain, modest dress and scuffed shoes made her stand out, like a misplaced piece of furniture in a luxury store. Lena forced herself to breathe slowly. She was here for a reason. There was something she needed to do. And she wasn't going to let anyone or anything stop her. She had come this far, and she couldn't afford to turn back now. She could feel the stairs as she walked through the lobby, her shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. They weren't kind stairs, no, these were the kind of stairs that stripped you down, made you feel small. It was the kind of gaze that dismissed her, as if she didn't belong. As if people like her had no place in a world like this. She ignored them. There was no time to focus on how out of place she felt. There was only one thing that mattered now. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning for the front desk. She spotted it on the far side of the room. As she approached, she tried to adjust her posture, stand a little taller. But it wasn't enough. She still felt the weight of their eyes on her. Behind the desk stood a young man, no older than 25. His dark hair was slicked back neatly, and his shirt, though a little wrinkled, still looked expensive. He was tapping away at a tablet, his eyes glued to the screen as though he had no interest in the world around him. His casual demeanor was the kind of indifference Lena had become all too familiar with. When she reached the desk, he didn't look up immediately. For a moment, she considered turning around and leaving. It wasn't too late to walk away. She could go back to the life she knew, the life that was safe and predictable. But that wasn't why she was here. Lena cleared her throat, just enough to get his attention. The man's eyes flickered up from the tablet, giving her a quick once-over before narrowing in judgment. "Can I help you?" His voice was smooth, but the condescension slipped through, evident in the way he spoke to her. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Lena's mouth went dry. She knew what he was thinking, another simple woman, here to waste his time. Another person who didn't belong. She straightened her back and forced her words out. "I need to speak with Mr. Patterson," she said, her voice a little steadier than she felt. It came out firm, even though every part of her wanted to falter under the weight of his gaze. The young man's eyes flickered down to his tablet again, as though she was just a minor inconvenience. His fingers hovered over the screen, searching for something. "Mr. Patterson is busy right now. You'll have to wait." Lena clenched her jaw. She hadn't come this far to wait. Not when she knew time was running out. She had to make him understand. "I'm not here to wait," she said, her voice colder this time. "I need to speak with him now." The young man's eyes widened slightly. The arrogance in his expression faltered for a second. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was back. He chuckled softly under his breath, the sound barely audible, but enough for Lena to catch it. He wasn't taking her seriously. No, to him, she was just another nuisance, just another insignificant person in a sea of hotel guests. "Listen, lady," he said, raising his hand dismissively, "you can't just walk in here and demand things. Mr. Patterson's schedule is full, and there's nothing I can do about it." Lena's pulse quickened. She had come here expecting resistance, but not this kind of arrogance. She had seen this attitude before, in other places. People like him, they thought they were untouchable, invincible. But she wasn't backing down this time. She couldn't. She leaned forward slightly, bringing herself closer to the desk. Her voice was low, but there was a quiet power behind it. "I'm not going to ask again." The manager hesitated. For just a split second, his eyes flickered with uncertainty. But then, as if shaking himself free of the momentary doubt, he straightened and met her gaze again. "I'm not letting you bother him, lady. So you can either wait, or leave." Lena took a breath, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. She had been prepared for this moment. She had known it would be difficult, that people would question her, dismiss her. But what they didn't know was that she wasn't just any woman. No, she was something far more complicated, far more dangerous, than they could ever imagine. Just then, the back door to the office behind the desk swung open, and Lena's attention snapped toward it. The noise in the lobby seemed to fade away as she saw him. Mr. Patterson. He stepped out from the shadows of the office, his presence undeniable. The man was tall, with broad shoulders and a confident stride that immediately commanded attention. His black suit was crisp and expensive, tailored perfectly to his frame. But it wasn't just his appearance that made him stand out. There was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, that made Lena's heart race. For a moment, the room felt frozen. Lena couldn't breathe. She had expected to see a man of power, someone important, but nothing prepared her for the intensity that radiated off of him. His gaze swept over the room, before landing on the young manager who still stood at the desk. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Patterson's voice was sharp, carrying an edge of authority that silenced the manager immediately. The young man stammered, unsure of how to respond. His face flushed with embarrassment. "No, sir. Just a guest wanting to speak with you." Mr. Patterson's eyes flickered over to Lena, taking her in with a single glance. His expression was unreadable, but something about the way he studied her made her skin prickle. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, watching her with an intensity that made her feel both seen and exposed at the same time. Then, as if deciding something, he gave a small nod toward the manager. "Let's talk in private," he said, his tone colder now. Lena nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. She didn't know why she agreed so quickly, why she felt an unexplainable pull toward him. But whatever it was, she knew it was important. She had no choice but to follow. As they walked toward the back office, she heard the manager mutter something under his breath. It was low, but she caught every word. "You have no idea who she really is." The words hit her like a slap to the face. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she turned to look over her shoulder, but the manager had already gone back to his duties, his face a mask of indifference. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know what he meant, but she felt it in her gut. Something wasn't right. Something was unfolding here that she wasn't prepared for. And just as the door to the back office closed behind them, she braced herself for whatever was coming next. She couldn't explain it, but Lena had a feeling that everything was about to change. The truth was waiting. But what would it cost to uncover it? The door clicked shut behind them, and Lena stood in the small, dimly lit office. Mr. Patterson took a seat behind the sleek desk, his chair creaking under his weight. He didn't invite her to sit, but his gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. There was a coldness to his demeanor, the kind that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Lena hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had expected to walk into a professional, controlled conversation, but this felt different. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. She could feel her pulse in her ears, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Everything about this moment seemed off. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're Mr. Patterson, I assume?" Her voice came out more like a statement than a question. It was a formality, one that seemed necessary, even if it didn't matter. She had already seen him, had already been swept up by the aura of authority that clung to him. He nodded once, the motion sharp and deliberate. "That's right. I've heard a great deal about you, Mrs. Thompson." His voice was smooth, professional, but there was an undertone in it that she couldn't quite place. It made her stomach churn, as though he knew something she didn't. Something important. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Mrs. Thompson? How could he possibly know her name? She had been so careful, so meticulous in her preparation. She hadn't told anyone why she was here, not even her closest colleagues. So how could this man, a stranger, know her? She fought to keep her composure, her hand tightening around the strap of her handbag. "How do you know who I am?" Her voice barely wavered, but her insides were twisting. She wasn't sure if she wanted to hear the answer. Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. He stared at her for a moment, as though contemplating something. "You could say I've been keeping an eye on you. A woman like you doesn't just show up in a place like this without reason. You have a reputation, Mrs. Thompson." His tone shifted slightly, a hint of something deeper, something darker, seeping into his words. Lena felt the color drain from her face. A reputation? What could he possibly mean? She wasn't anyone special. She was just a woman doing her job, keeping her life together after a decade of struggle. But she could sense that the world Mr. Patterson was hinting at was far more complicated than she had ever realized. She couldn't stop herself. What kind of reputation? The words spilled out before she could stop them. The question was out there now, and she needed to know the answer. Mr. Patterson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up from behind the desk and walked toward the window, his back to her. The room seemed to grow colder as the silence stretched on, a heaviness in the air that felt impossible to ignore. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. "You've been in the public eye for years, Mrs. Thompson. You're known for your work, your dedication. People admire you for your strength and your resolve. But not everyone sees you the same way." Lena's heart skipped. Her throat tightened. She had been trying so hard to keep her personal life hidden, to bury the past and move forward. But clearly, there were forces at work here that knew far too much. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice quieter now, tinged with fear. Mr. Patterson turned to face her, his eyes colder than ever. "You know exactly what I mean. You're a judge, Mrs. Thompson. A Supreme Court judge. The highest court in the land." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Lena's mind reeled. Judge? The highest court? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her legs almost gave way beneath her. No, this couldn't be right. She was just a simple woman, a survivor. She had spent years fighting to rebuild her life after everything had fallen apart. But a judge? A Supreme Court judge? That was a life she had never lived, at least not in the way he seemed to think. She shook her head, trying to clear the confusion clouding her thoughts. "I'm not a judge. I'm no one important," she said, her voice trembling. She was fighting to hold on to her composure, but every word he spoke threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. Mr. Patterson's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "I think you're more important than you realize, Mrs. Thompson. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." Lena took a step back, her hands gripping the edge of the desk for support. She could feel the walls closing in on her, the suffocating realization that something was terribly wrong. She didn't know what he wanted from her, but she knew it wasn't good. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they didn't fit together in any way she could understand. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but you're wrong about me," Lena said, her voice rising in desperation. "I'm just a woman who's had enough. Enough of pretending. Enough of being treated like I'm invisible. Mr. Patterson didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked around the desk and stopped in front of her, leaning in just a little too close. His eyes bored into hers, and she could see the flicker of something dangerous in them. I'm not wrong, Mrs. Thompson. And you're not invisible. In fact, you've never been more visible than you are right now. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried an undeniable weight. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Lena's pulse raced. She took a step back, her mind spinning. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. She had thought she was prepared for anything, but this? This was something else entirely. Before she could respond, the door to the office suddenly opened, and a tall, older man stepped in. His presence was commanding, but there was a softness to his features, a kindness in his eyes that immediately stood in stark contrast to Patterson's coldness. Lena didn't recognize him, but he must have known Mr. Patterson. The two exchanged a brief, unreadable glance before the older man turned his attention to Lena. "Is everything all right here, Mr. Patterson?" the man asked, his voice low and calm. Mr. Patterson straightened, a flash of irritation crossing his face before it was quickly masked. "Everything is fine, Mr. Grant. We're just getting started." Lena took a step back, glancing between the two men. Something about this new arrival put her on edge. His eyes were gentle, but there was a strength to him, an underlying power that was impossible to ignore. Mr. Grant's gaze shifted to her. "You're Mrs. Thompson, correct?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Lena nodded, though she wasn't sure if she could trust anyone in this room anymore. "Yes, but I don't understand what's going on here. What do you want from me?" Mr. Grant didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "We want the truth, Mrs. Thompson. We want to know who you really are. The world needs to know." Lena's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had been trying so hard to hide from the truth, to bury the past. But now, it seemed, it was coming for her whether she was ready or not. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mr. Grant's eyes softened. "The world thinks they know you, Mrs. Thompson. But there are truths hidden in plain sight that even you don't understand yet. The question is, will you be brave enough to face them?" The room seemed to close in on her as the weight of his words pressed down. Lena didn't know what she was supposed to do, but one thing was clear. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again. And that was only the beginning. Lena's world was slowly crumbling. The past hour felt like an eternity, and every word spoken by Mr. Patterson and Mr. Grant had unraveled everything she thought she knew about herself. She was no longer just a woman in a hotel lobby, she was something else entirely, something they seemed to understand better than she did. The moment Mr. Grant stepped into the room, everything changed. His soft voice, his steady gaze, something about him felt different from Patterson. He wasn't here to intimidate her, he was here to guide her, though she wasn't sure where. She sat in the chair opposite the desk, her fingers clenched tightly around the worn strap of her bag. Her heart still hammered in her chest, the adrenaline of the encounter pulling at her every nerve. She was fighting to stay composed, but the truth was, she felt like she was losing control. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Grant's voice was calm, almost gentle, as he took a seat across from her. "I know this is a lot to process. But it's crucial that you understand why we're here." Lena nodded slowly, her breath shaky. "I don't understand any of this. You say I'm someone I don't recognize. You talk about a reputation I don't have." Her voice wavered, then strengthened. "What do you want from me? What's going on?" Patterson, who had remained silent up until now, shifted in his seat, his eyes never leaving her. He was still cold, still calculating, like a predator waiting to pounce. "We want answers, Mrs. Thompson. And we need you to give them to us. Lena's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady. She couldn't let them see how rattled she was. She had spent years building a life, a new identity, trying to keep her past buried. And now, it was all coming to the surface, pieces of her life she thought were long buried, pieces she hadn't even dared to acknowledge herself. "I don't have any answers for you," she whispered. "I'm just, me." Mr. Grant leaned forward, his eyes kind, but there was an intensity behind them that made Lena feel small. "You may think you're just you, but what you don't realize is that you've been part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. Something that has been watching, waiting for the right time." Lena's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What is this? Who are you?" Mr. Patterson stood abruptly, his tall frame casting a shadow over the room. He moved to the window, staring out into the city. The tension between the three of them was palpable, the air thick with something that felt both ominous and inevitable. "This isn't just about you, Mrs. Thompson," Patterson said, his back still turned to her. "This is about everything. This is about a system you were born into, a system that needs you to step up. Your story isn't just yours, it's part of something much larger." Lena could barely keep up with his words. The more he spoke, the more confused she became. But something in her gut told her she needed to listen. They were trying to tell her something, and it wasn't going to be easy to hear. "I don't know what you mean. I'm just an ordinary woman," Lena said, her voice quivering despite her best efforts. "I've spent years running away from my past. I don't want to go back to it." Mr. Grant's expression softened. "You don't have to go back, Mrs. Thompson. You just need to understand where you've come from. It's the only way forward." Patterson turned from the window, his eyes now fixed on Lena. "You've been hiding in plain sight. For years. But it's time to stop pretending." His words hung in the air like a threat. Lena swallowed hard. This was too much. She felt the walls of the office closing in on her, the space around her growing smaller and smaller. "What do you want from me?" The question seemed to hang in the air, unanswered, for far too long. Finally, it was Mr. Grant who spoke, his voice low and careful. "We want you to remember, Mrs. Thompson," he said. "We want you to remember who you really are. And what you're capable of." Lena shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not anyone special. I'm not the person you think I am." Mr. Grant's eyes remained locked on hers. "You were once someone very important. You still are. You just need to remember." The silence in the room was suffocating. Lena's mind raced. There was no way. She wouldn't, believe what they were implying. She had spent too long burying that part of herself. She wasn't that person anymore. She couldn't be. She stood suddenly, her legs unsteady beneath her. "This is crazy. I'm not who you think I am. I'm just a woman who's had enough of being invisible, of being pushed around. I've fought to get where I am. I'm not going back." Patterson's cold eyes never left her. "You don't have a choice. The past is pulling you back in whether you like it or not." Lena's breath caught in her throat. It was as though the room was closing in on her, the air too thick to breathe. The weight of their words pressed down on her chest like an anchor. She couldn't escape it. She had been running from something, but now she realized that there was nowhere to run. She backed away from the desk, her fingers trembling as they gripped the back of the chair. "I don't want this. I don't want to be part of whatever this is." Mr. Grant stood up, his demeanor calm, but firm. "It's not a matter of what you want, Mrs. Thompson. This is about what the world needs. What you can give them." Lena's mind reeled. She was suffocating in the weight of it all. She needed answers, she needed to understand what was happening, what they were saying. But every answer they gave only opened the door to more questions. She felt like she was spiraling, falling deeper into a rabbit hole she couldn't escape. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not that person anymore. I can't go back to who I was." Patterson's expression hardened. "You can't run from the truth. It will find you, no matter how far you try to hide." Lena could feel her heart racing, her pulse in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But something deep inside told her that running wouldn't work this time. She had to face whatever this was, whatever they were telling her. "I don't know who I am anymore," she murmured, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I don't know how to be that person you think I am." There was a long pause, the silence stretching between them, thick and heavy. Then, Mr. Grant spoke, his voice calm, almost compassionate. "Sometimes, Mrs. Thompson, we have to lose ourselves to find out who we really are." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She staggered back, her vision blurred for a moment as the weight of it all pressed down on her. Her world was unraveling, piece by piece, and she was helpless to stop it. As she stood there, the truth hanging in the air like a bitter taste in her mouth, Lena realized that there was no turning back. Whatever path lay ahead, it was one she had to walk. There was no more running. Lena's mind was a whirlwind. Each passing second felt like a lifetime, each word spoken by Mr. Patterson and Mr. Grant slicing through her like a blade. She had spent so long trying to forget, trying to bury the past deep enough that it would never resurface. But now, as she stood there, trembling and confused, she knew she couldn't run from it any longer. The room was suffocating, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. She had heard Mr. Grant's words, and though they were soft and patient, they struck her with a brutal truth she had long tried to avoid. "Sometimes, Mrs. Thompson, we have to lose ourselves to find out who we really are." She could feel her breath coming in shallow gasps, and every part of her screamed to leave. To flee from this madness. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. There was no escaping this. There was no escaping herself. Lena stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the cold surface of the chair as she steadied herself. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do anymore. She had spent years building a life, constructing a fragile semblance of normalcy, but it was all crashing down around her. The truth, whatever it was, had found her, and she had no choice but to face it. The door to the office creaked open, and for the first time since entering the room, Lena felt a small wave of relief. It wasn't Mr. Patterson. It wasn't Mr. Grant. It was someone she hadn't expected to see, someone who had no business being here. A man she had not seen in over a decade. "Lena," his voice was hesitant, barely audible, but she recognized it immediately. Her heart skipped, and the world around her seemed to slow. The man who had just entered the room was Daniel, her ex-husband. The man who had once been her everything, and then, after the divorce, the person she tried to forget. The man who had walked away from her, leaving her broken and alone. And now, here he was, standing before her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "Daniel?" Her voice came out shaky, barely a whisper. He nodded, his eyes downcast for a moment before lifting them to meet hers. The moment their gazes locked, the past came rushing back. The love they had shared, the life they had built, and the devastating betrayal that had shattered it all. "Why are you here?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. The questions piled up inside her, but she couldn't find the words to ask them all at once. Daniel took a step toward her, his face a mask of guilt and regret. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he said quietly, almost apologetically. "But it's time you knew the truth." Lena's mind raced. The truth. What truth? Her heart hammered in her chest as she tried to make sense of the words he was saying. "What truth?" she demanded, her voice rising with frustration. "What do you mean? What is this all about?" Mr. Patterson, who had been watching silently from the corner, finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We've been trying to help Mrs. Thompson understand who she really is, Daniel. It's time she learned the full extent of her past. The past she's been running from." Daniel's face hardened at Patterson's words, but he didn't take his eyes off Lena. "She doesn't need to know any of this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's moved on. We've moved on." But Mr. Grant, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his calm demeanor in stark contrast to the emotions swirling around them. "She has a right to know, Daniel. We all do." Lena's head was spinning. She was drowning in confusion, unable to grasp what was happening. She had thought this was just about her, her life, her secrets, but now it seemed like there was something much bigger at play. Something involving Daniel, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Grant, and perhaps even more people she had no idea about. "I'm not sure I understand," Lena said, her voice shaking with the weight of it all. "Why are you here, Daniel? Why is any of this happening?" Daniel's eyes softened, and for the briefest moment, Lena saw a flicker of the man she had once loved. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by something darker. Something more dangerous. "I never wanted you to get tangled up in this, Lena," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "But it's too late now. The truth is already out." Lena's heart twisted in her chest. She wanted to scream, to throw her hands over her ears and block out everything they were telling her. But the truth was pressing in from all sides, relentless and unforgiving. There was no escaping it. "What truth?" she repeated, her voice rising now, demanding an answer. Patterson took a step forward, his cold eyes fixed on her. "The truth about who you are, Mrs. Thompson. You're not just some woman with a simple life. You're not just a judge. You've been part of a much larger plan, a much larger game, for longer than you realize." Lena felt her stomach drop. A game? What game? She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted any of this. She had wanted peace, a quiet life, far away from the chaos that had consumed her before. "You're lying," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Mr. Grant stepped in, his voice gentle but firm. "I know it's hard to believe, Lena. But it's the truth. You were chosen for something much bigger than you understood. And now, you're at the center of it all." The words hit Lena like a punch to the gut. Chosen? Center of it all? She couldn't process it. It was too much. She was just an ordinary woman. She had lived through loss, through pain, through betrayal, but this? This was beyond anything she could have imagined. Daniel took a step toward her, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, Lena. I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of this. But there's no way out. Not now." Lena's mind spun. She felt the ground beneath her feet begin to shift, the solid foundation she had built for herself beginning to crumble. Everything she thought she knew was being pulled out from under her. The woman she had been, the life she had fought so hard to create, it was all based on lies. Lies she had told herself, lies they had told her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't believe you." But the look in Daniel's eyes, the look in Mr. Patterson's, told her that this wasn't a choice she had. The truth was already out. And no matter how much she fought it, she couldn't change it. Mr. Grant's voice broke the silence. "The truth is this, Lena. You were meant to be more than just a judge. You were meant to be the key. The one to unlock the truth behind everything." Lena took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. The key? What could they possibly mean? She wasn't anyone important. She wasn't anything special. But the answer was there, buried deep inside her. She had known it all along, even when she had tried so hard to forget. The past she had buried, the secrets she had hidden, they were all coming back now, rising to the surface. The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, everything stood still. And then, in the quietest voice she had ever heard, Lena spoke the words she had never thought she would say. "I remember.